I'll turn my microphone on so I can be official too. Karen, you can hear us all right?
Yep, I can hear you fine. Sorry, I meant to email earlier to let you know I would be joining by June.
That's okay. We're glad you're with us.
Join, joining by Zoom.
I'll try and enunciate as well here. All right, welcome to the work session, January 16th, 2024. We've got a fair amount to do tonight, so we'll start as usual with our board and commission interviews. And we have Charles Janicki with us, who is interviewing for the Architectural Review Board, and he currently serves on the Board of Adjustment as an alternate member. If you would just come on up to the microphone, please. Maybe it's been a while since you've had to do this, who knows? So if you'll just tell us why you'd like to be, and we've got your application, but if you'd like to tell us why you'd like to be on the Architectural Review Board and what you might bring to the board in just a few minutes, we'd appreciate it. Okay.
Oh, sorry. I think it's important to be able to, give back to the community if you can, which is what I'm all about. And I've done that. I served on the Parks Board for the city of Fenton for 10 years. And I've done volunteer work for my parishes that I belong to. And so I think it's important if you can do that and give back to the community. It just makes things that much better. So.
Are there questions?
Just a quick comment, if I may. For the sake of complete transparency, Mr. Janicki here is the father-in-law to my son, Peter.
Please don't hold that.
And over the years, actually, I met Chuck long before he and Catherine, Peter and Catherine started dating, and certainly long before they were married, when he did built a firehouse for me in one of the fire protection districts that I represent. Right. Over the years, I have called upon him to provide services for me in districts where we have had problems with projects that have gone out there. His association is with Jennifer Gates, who also is a Webster Groves resident with Gates Design. So again, I have used Chuck many, many, many times over the years. And when this position opened, I said, you've done things like this before. Why don't you apply? So I just wanted you all to know that.
And that's the other thing. And as Neil just said, and we have a great relationships, as you probably tell. And that's true. We did know each other way before Catherine and Peter met, and there was quite a look on her face when I told her that
you could pronounce Bruntrigger.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the initial thing. But we just finished a project which Neil with the attorney for the ambulance district out in Lincoln County, and we were hired to be the owner's representative. So not only do we have the experience, or I have the experience of being, an designer, architect, consultant, but also we were able to work on behalf of the owner as the owner's representative and to see things from his side, or their side, I should say. And that breadth of experience bodes very well in terms of how you deal with initial problems, how you deal with the owner, with the consultants, with the contractors. And that experience has really brought us to the forefront, I think, as being, really good at being owner's reps, I think. Sure, they like us. They actually, to kind of piggyback on that, the architect for the building that we were the owner's rep for, we are replacing them to do the remainder of their work. And we're going to use our experience as their owner's representative in such a way that they won't need to go out and get an owner's rep for these other projects because we've done all this work for them.
Sarah, did you?
Yeah, I just had one question. Just I have no questions about your qualifications for the ARB. I think you would be fantastic there, but I am curious about, in terms of time commitment, if you, as an alternate on the Board of Adjustment, if that is any concern, because I know the ARB is a pretty heavy time commitment. So
No, as an alternate, I mean, she rotates, Mara rotates us. So I don't
just
see that as
just
being a
wanted to
problem.
check.
So.
David, did you have something?
Yeah, that was my question.
Okay. All right. Well, I know we have at least one other person who's going to apply, so we probably won't make a decision tonight, but thank you very much.
Okay.
And we look forward to speaking with you.
All right, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Does anyone have anything on the regular agenda that they would like for us to review now? No? All right. Well, then we'll start with updates, and yes, we'll just do our usual order.
Yes, Mayor, I have 2 updates. So both Green Space and Historic Preservation met last week. And for Green Space, we set the date, they set the date for the Arbor Day celebration. So that should be getting on the city calendar soon. I think we're going to have it at Southwest Park this year. Was it Blackburn last year? And they kind of reviewed projects with a new member that joined. And then on Historic Preservation, the bulk of the meeting time was spent for the public hearing for HPC for the Bethel Lutheran Church about a historic preservation for that in the end, HPC did vote to move that forward to council. So that is a recommendation and a request from the commission as opposed to from the owner that will be coming our way, I think in early February. And that's it.
No updates from me, Madam Mayor.
The only update I have is just kind of a heads up that the Business Development Commission is going to have their networking coffee on February 7th, which is right after our next meeting. And for a while now, the Business Development Commission has been talking about ways to try to unify the business districts here and find ways for kind of the outlying business areas to be part of that. So with that as kind of the main impetus, Eric is going to go over, is going to present some organizational structures for business districts and talk about typical ways that other cities have organized business districts, and so that'll be a review of that. I think it's important for us to know about these options as well, because it seems it's kind of an ongoing comment that we hear from the Business Development Commission for us to please look at that. So just wanted to give you a heads up that that's on February 7th at 8:30 in the morning at the Recplex.
Great, thank you.
No updates, Mayor.
No updates.
Karen, anything from you?
No, ma'am, no updates.
Right.
I have no updates.
Just one update, Madam Mayor, a reminder that the community survey on the police chief recruitments opened last week. We're hoping to receive a lot of responses from the community on that. The position will officially post tomorrow, so the community survey results will come in incredibly handy and will be used as we review applications that come in. We'll take the survey results and align those with the qualifications that we receive. Just as a note for community that might be listening, before this was done, there was an internal survey done with police staff to get their ideas on the next police chief as well. So that's been incorporated also. So really excited about the process. And again, hope we get lots of community feedback.
Thank you. Katie, anything for you?
Yes, I just wanted to introduce Karen Rangel. She's going to be the new Deputy City Clerk. She's been serving and will be officially designated this evening. So we welcome her.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Karen. Glad you're with us. I do have a little bit of a list. I did go to the State of the County address, which was given by Dr. Page last week. A laundry list of things they're working on and some really good ideas. Lots of concern about their budget, including some thoughts about how thinking into the future about revenue. It does appear that they will go out again for a use tax in 2025. So not this cycle, but the next one. And then they've done some rebranding. I don't know if any of you have seen that, but the new slogan for the county is Opportunity Central. So you live in Opportunity Central. Also, there was a Metro Mayor's meeting focusing largely on state legislative issues. The senior property tax rate is going to be the subject to some corrective legislation, it looks like, largely to make sure that it stands constitutional muster, possibly, and then to clarify some eligibility issues. So we'll see where that goes. It's scheduled to go into effect in 2025. There's a lot of discussion of the grocery sales tax. Eric's put together some numbers for us, and we'll look at that today. There is a push among many mayors to have councils pass resolutions asking the state legislature not to do this, or if this is done, to do it in a way that does recognize another source for local government revenue. I'm not at this point recommending that or asking us to do that, but I wanted you to know there is that discussion in there, at least 5 cities hiring lobbyists on this issue because they are so dependent on grocery sales tax that it could mean up to 25, 30, 40% of their budget reduction if it goes through. So I just want to put that on the radar for us. I did present on behalf of the entire council a resolution or a proclamation recognizing Chancellor Strobel upon her retirement from Webster University. And then a couple of notes about things coming up. Congressional Cities Conference for the National League of Cities, March 11th through 13th. I plan on attending. I know that Eric will be there. Please, if you're going to attend, try and make that decision within the next week so that we can get good air rates and things like that. And I think you can let Eric and Katie know if you plan to do that. David was kidding beforehand about the free time of council members without a contested election. I'm going to commit to, in the month of March, spending a portion of each of my Saturday out knocking doors and answering questions about Proposition W and about the Charter Review Advisory Board amendments, and then anything else that anybody wants to talk to. And I'm going to ask right now that each one of you join me for a couple of Saturdays, and we'll have literature and we can get ourselves organized and make sure that we're in different parts of the city. So please let me know if you're willing to do that with me. I think it'll be good for us to hear. I mean, one of the things we know about campaigns is that's a great time for people to talk to you about what's on their mind. This is another way to both give information, but also receive some information as well. So I'm seeing a lot of nodding, so I'm signing every single one of you up. Yes.
Mayor, will we have some talking points?
We will. So we'll have some literature that, educational literature, because remember, we are going there to answer questions, provide educational resources, because that's our job rather than advocacy. But we'll have those available. I think that by March, we should definitely have them. I think probably into February, we'll have some things that to just make sure that we all know what we're talking about fully. Hopefully we do. Okay. And then the last thing I wanted us to talk about just a little bit, or I wanted to ask you about is, we officially send 10 items from the Charter Review Advisory Board today to the election board. That is not our entire list. There are at least kind of 5 other areas, compensation, a collection of various administrative and organizational questions, some questions about boards and commissions, initiative, petition, recall, information, and then a public engagement section. And my question to you is, we don't have another election deadline for a little while. So on the one hand, there's not a pressing time concern from us. On the other hand, we're going to get into budget season pretty soon, and that's going to take a lot of our time. So I guess I'm asking, what kind of urgency do you all feel to do this? The other thing I'll say about these is I think all 5 of these are a little more complicated, and it might be worth us having some work session time or regular meeting time in place and have somebody from the Charter Review Advisory Board come in and tell us what they did and why they did it. I mean, Neil and Marie certainly can tell us what happened. I think on these issues, it might be worth hearing why they wanted to make these changes as well, because some of them are less intuitive than what we've already seen. So any thoughts on how you all might want to proceed and in what time frame?
I would like to see him on the November ballot.
On the November ballot? Okay. I think that's doable. Anybody else have thoughts?
That was my first thought. Or to consider those 5 for the November ballot.
It makes sense to me that we have more time before we start the budget in force.
I can't hear what whoever just said.
I'm sorry, Karen. I was just saying I was agreeing with Pam and Emerson and saying that it made sense to me if we have work session time available, especially before we get started on the budget in full force, to use that to help us discuss these.
Okay. You're shaking your head, Dr. Peoples.
Only because I think we will figure out scheduling. It's going to be a busy budget season, as you all know. We're going to do some things different with budget this year. Really excited about, as council has adopted the new strategic plan, trying to align the budget goals and staff budgets with the strategic plan. So looking forward to some discussions for council. We will certainly make time for other items though.
All right, so what I'm hearing, is there anyone who disagrees with shooting for a November ballot for the next round of these?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. That's what I was just getting ready to ask for clarification, because I think the 5 that we're shooting for this ballot for April is what we've already reviewed.
Correct.
And then we're talking about pursuing the remainder in November.
Yeah, up until, working toward November.
Working toward November. Okay.
I have no objection to putting more on the ballot in November. My only concern is I don't want to rush anything, especially some of these pretty difficult and require a lot of discussion, I think, before we take it to the voters and the educational part of that. So I think November is great, but I don't think that it's necessary that we get everything on the November ballot at this even.
So November as a goal, but not a firm deadline. It just depends on how we feel like we are in terms of the amount of information we have. Okay. So then the city manager and the city clerk and I will work on scheduling with some members of the Charter Review Advisory Board to get these on our work session, or sometimes during our regular meeting. During the budget presentations, it may be better just to have it during the regular meeting. We have done most of our work in the regular meeting already for that. Okay. Believe it or not, that's the end of my issues and updates. So we are going to move on to our topics. Mr. Peterson.
It's a heavy mister there, Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. We're pulling up the presentation. Just to review, we'll just check and make sure this works. Let's move the mouse. And click on it once for me. Perfect, there we go. All right, so we have at your tables our traditional quarterly report in terms of the line item budget, and then also the PowerPoint presentation. You have the investment summary as well that we provide to you all. And then you have a separate document, which I'll go to when we get to that point. I just want to highlight when we get there, and for the public, we're not releasing this document because state law prohibits us from mentioning the figures for sales tax per account, which means business. So I'm asking council, don't ask a specific question about the numbers on this sheet publicly. So
don't break the law.
Don't break the law, please. Yes. But everyone who's watching from home, I know we have 80 million people joining us for this. Please go to webstergrovesmo.gov/budget. You'll find all our documents there as well. And we'll post this video later on when we're done.
Eric, this is only for my own edification, but what's the purpose behind that law? Do you know?
It's encompassed within the privacy of your income tax laws. They included the sales tax accounts for businesses. So we can know what a business has paid in sales tax, but we cannot release that data in the singular.
Interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome. So Webster, I just did that. We're going to go over the update today on our Q2 budget performance, our investment report as always. We're going to talk about sales tax, especially in line with the grocery tax issues that we've talked about, and then look at the budget amendments we'll be bringing up and the budget process. Just a quick overview for you all. So in our budget performance, our all funds, $30 million budget. We're in a surplus budget, about $9,000. We're in a great spot. 48% of revenues have been received, exceeding last year, in line with last year's revenues. 41% of expenditures. You're going to see last year looks a little higher. That's the ARP money flowing in. So you don't have that extra federal grant coming in this year. So I'm not concerned about the actual year to date to where we were this past year, because that difference is really the ARP funds. And then in the general fund, we're in a very good spot. We have 50% of the revenue in and 51% of expenditures made. It's about a $19 million budget, and very good numbers. Again, from this point last year, we had about $1 million worth of settlement funds that were deposited due to the legal settlements about this time. So our revenues look a little higher last year. If you take that $1 million out, we're in fact exceeding where we were for revenue at this point last year. Okay. This is a new slide I've added. This is all the classification, so not each individual line item, but by grouping of revenue streams.
Eric, I'm sorry, you're sharing something. I can't see anything here.
I'm sorry, we forgot to share it, Adam. Just give me 2 seconds, we'll help.
Okay.
It's okay.
Madam, Karen, can you see that now?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Sorry about that. This is the slide we were showing you, just the difference in all funds. You have this in PDF as well. You should have had it emailed to you. But the all funds budget in line, 48% of revenue, 41% of expenditures. General fund, 50% of revenue, 51% of expenditures. So those are the numbers we just talked through. So this is where we were. Karen, can you just grab that box and pull it down? This is our classification groupings of revenue. And so these are the different line items grouped up into their like purposes. Property taxes show at 72%. Why is that? Because we're all paying our property taxes right now. And so that's why we're seeing 72%. Really good numbers here overall. Intergovernmental revenues exceeding the budget, almost 60% in. That's the state cigarette sales tax, auto sales tax, things like that. Our sales taxes are at 47% of budget. That's all with 5 months of tax revenue, not 6, even though we're through the quarterly 2 because of the delay. So we have 5 months of tax revenue. Utility taxes actually pretty strong for the historical trends to have 42% this year, and the fact that most of the heating tax through gas has not yet been applied, and really that demand of that usage. Licenses are down, not down, but they show small because our business licenses, which is the biggest chunk of them, really go through that renewal process in April. Inspection fees and permits are incredibly strong, and we'll go through building permits, but there's a lot of activity going on through planning and development, a lot of folks pulling permits and a lot of costs and project size and such. So that's adding a lot to that. Our fine revenue is up. Municipal courts are moving through more cases and having more collections. So we are seeing a return to some normalcy. I hate to use that term with municipal court fines, but sort of where we were at the beginning of the COVID pandemic.
Eric, is that because we're catching up, or is that a higher rate than in the past in terms of new
citations?
Correct.
I don't think that I'm not aware of any increase in the number of citations. I think collection efforts, namely people willing to pay, then also the court is processing in a little more expedient fashion.
Great, thank you.
Would you say a little bit more about that, just in terms of court backlog and how we're processing cases and catching up?
Certainly. So I think there's, I believe our number is about 6,000 cases that are pending in the municipal court. They go all the way back to some of them well into the middle 20 teens. That doesn't mean that they haven't been brought to the court and heard, but a case is always open until it's finally either paid or dismissed by the judge. So we have folks who may not have paid. And of course we have not been a very stringent, go out and find people and arrest them for, simply not paying a speeding ticket or such. But the court has been moving through with much larger dockets. Judge Laritz and the prosecutors have really moved some larger dockets. I've seen some dockets that are close to 600 people on the docket. That doesn't mean 600 show up, but 600 cases called, for municipal court in one night. And they're continuing with pretty full dockets. So the prosecutors are working hard at trying to do recommendations and do a lot of business outside of the court, so we don't have to use court time and such. So, but there is a backlog, and we'll identify explicitly municipal court fines where we're at as well for you. The other one I wanted to point out is charges for services that's exceeding where we've been. Those are charges we make to other governments or other people for services that we provide. So rec fees are right in line. Overall, our general fund revenue is in a very good spot for this year, this point to date. So some of the spotlights on that, this is our pooled sales tax. Again, last year was the first year we identified that singularly and separated out. We are at 45% through 5 months of collections. We are at this point, last year, we're at 1.9, we're at 1.7 this year. I'm not raising any alarm about the pooled sales tax. It's just one of those areas we can consistently watch. Are we getting the return on the pooled sales tax, since it's our biggest sales tax driver? And then our fire sales tax, we always bring this up again because this is our true point of sales tax. This gives us a sense of the economic vitality within the city of Webster Groves. We are ahead of where ahead of where we were at last year. We were at 284 last year. We're at 310,000 right now this year so far, again, with only 5 months of collections. This is our local use tax. Folks, we have a winner here in this one in terms of revenue streams. In fact, we just got this month's, which is not included. And there's another $95,000 in 1 month for the use tax. Use tax, again, is out of sales, out of state companies, online served purchases. We're at 71% of the budget. And so at 529, and we'll certainly go up with that other 95 to 620. I think this is one where we'll be revising our estimates so we can match up as we look ahead to budget amendments with where we expect to be.
Eric, what's the timing lag on that? So if I buy something online in January, when does the city see that revenue?
If you buy online in January, generally every company has a little different. There's 3 different reporting cycles at the Department of Revenue. So most of them are monthly reporters. So by the end of the month, they're remitting to the state the property tax, the sales taxes they've collected. Our turnaround is relatively quick, usually within 5 to 6 days.
Oh,
so that turnaround is quick. Where we get the 2-month delay is when it goes through the county and the pooled sales tax and such.
Okay.
Yep. So in reality, your January, while we receive it in February, we count that as the January revenue. So we always talk about we're a month late. That's why. Yep. This is our municipal.
When we say, I'm sorry,
go ahead.
If you go back, but when we say 5 months collection, but 71% of budget year to date, I mean.
So that means we have only collected 5 months out of 12 payments that we'll receive in the fiscal year from the state. And we're already 71% of the budget number has been received. We budgeted at 750,000 and we're at 529,000. So the point being is our budget estimates are low, continually low. Like we had no real data to know how much we're going to be getting from this. So this continues to exceed expectations in terms of what we will be expecting year over year.
Okay, and this is basically August through December.
Okay.
Okay.
Municipal court fines. You can see some of the past trends on this. We give you the 5-year chart. You can see in 2020, our budgeted amount at 615. We're at 62% of our budget estimate for this year already. This point last year, 114,000. So we're 40,000 more right now on where we're at in collection on fines. This is building permits. You can see these orange bars. That's the actuals on these slides. We're at 69% of the budget year to date, 490,000. We were 390,000 at this point last year. So $100,000 more. That's driven by folks, pulling permits and the size of construction projects and such. Some of them can be large projects. It can be volume of smaller projects, but that's all through planning and development. But again, very strong numbers and exceeding expectations. Oops. Stop. There we go. Water gross receipts. So water has rebounded. This is our water sales, the gross receipts tax. We're at 70% of the budget year to date. These, of course, have been always the gross receipts issues have always been ones to watch. We're at 212,000 at this point last year to 300,000 right now. So well ahead of where we are and have been in terms of payments on the water tax. This is gas gross receipts, natural gas. You can see we've exceeded our estimates in 22 and 23. I would expect 24 most likely will be the same, especially given this cold spell we just went through and the amount of gas that was used. We're only at 32% of budget, but that's, again, we haven't received those real cold heating months for gas usage. This is our telephone gross receipts. This is always a challenge with telephone lines being removed and such like that. So folks working without them, but we are at 38% of budget. We've always, other than 22, have generally gotten close to the numbers we're shooting for here at the 360. You can see our budget in 20 and 21 were much higher for these gross receipts, but the actuals really have come down as practice has changed with folks. And then electric gross receipts, we're at 41% of the budget year to date, 664,000. At this point, we're at 826. I do not know what's driving that difference in number. I don't, certainly we haven't had electrical usage change that much across the city that I've seen. So that's when we're doing a little digging on to see if there's a lag in some reason in the gross receipts coming through from from Ameren is where that's coming. Our cable franchise fees, these are the fees that cable companies paid us to be in our right of way. Budget of 225, we're at 57 right now, 57,000, 26% of the budget, just a little shy of where we were last year. Much of those come here in the first quarter of the calendar year.
That's actually, if you don't mind me interrupting you for a second here. That is the other thing that came up at our Metro Mayor's meeting and the legislative update. Apparently Amazon, Hulu, and somebody else have all now hired lobbyists as well to try and fight the expansion of these franchise fees to streamers, which is really, that would be the trade-off in the revenue. So this is another issue that is, apparently Creve Coeur is heading the case in court about this. Creve Coeur feels like it's winning, so the legislature's being pressured to fix that for the big streaming companies. So we should watch that in the legislature as well. Thank you for letting me interrupt.
No problem. I promised you an electric vehicle charging revenue. We have one station outside of City Hall. We've received $223. That is 25 cents per kilowatt hour, which I will say for one charging station is not bad considering it's one charging station here at City Hall. So.
And it stays fairly busy.
It does, yeah. We're a very cheap rate at 25 cents a kilowatt hour.
Which is probably why it's
yeah, exactly, yeah. So switching to expenditures, this is our expenditures by class again. So the grouping of classes. We're at 50% overall in the general fund. Personnel services are at 48% of the general fund. Materials and supplies at 40% year to date. And then contractual services are now at 62%. Much of that is because whole year contracts are usually paid at the beginning of the fiscal year. So those payments will go out early on. And then other expenditures at 57. Our capital outlay classification, we don't use any of the general fund for any capital costs. Those all have been moved to the capital side. So you're going to see zeros through that line. I want to highlight just a couple for you of our certain line items. This is electricity use across the city. We're at 67% of budget year to date. So we spent 277,234 at this point last year. So our electric use is up across the city. Which makes exactly, yeah. This, when we were doing the analysis on the numbers, pointed out we need to look at that revenue side and the collection side. The fancy word in revenue is the leakage, right? Why is that not showing and translating through if we have revenue, if we have electric use increase? So not only us, but assuming around the rest of the city as well. Natural gas, 44% of the budget year to date. Very comfortable with this number. Of course, if we have a hard winter season and continued cold and a lot of cold, well, this number will probably exceed budget, but we're in a comfortable spot at the point. We're at 31,000 last year. So. And then we just pulled, this is overtime. So you can see some of our overtime in the general fund. The bottom number and where it says general fund totals is the overall overtime cost of the whole general fund. Municipal court, as we talked about, we've had them on overtime working through backlogs and such and case processing. So they're well over, and we're moving that off here shortly. So we're not going to see those numbers continue to grow. but that's been a practice going through the office. Police is at 88% overtime of their budget right now. That does not include any of the reimbursements that will come in from some of the grants they get. So that's the true cost as it sits right now. Fire department unscheduled overtime. Remember, they split their overtime schedule lines. The unscheduled, which is if people are out, that question, 42% of usage at the moment. And then training and special events is for those mandatories need to come in for this training or such, 47% at this point. And of course, that split wasn't there last year, so it's a zero. But overall, last year, the fire department was at 209,000 at this point in the year in overtime. That was prior to the March action on CBA. We're now at, if you look at that, just a shade about 110. So, much more effective management of the overtime.
So Eric, looking at that police line again, just to be clear, that isn't, you could say it's inflated because we haven't gotten reimbursements back from some of the grants. It's not a matter of not having the staff we need in the police department.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay.
So I want to just briefly move to our quarterly investment report. Again, congratulate Mr. Donovan as he's done our investments. You have the full sheet in front of you, but our summary there. We hold $26.6 million in investments in cash. Investments of out of that, investments of 12.2 million. Our liquidity, 54% liquid, 46% illiquid. Our yield spread is really what I wanted to point out. We have moved off of the really low value investments we have. They've all come to maturity and moved them in. So we've moved up our yield spread from 0.05% to 2% at our bottom rate. So a much tighter yield spread and really gaining the best possible interest we can as things come mature. And our weighted yield is 5.95% as you look at that. Again, and there's I believe I'm going to look back, the 5.68% has a sizable chunk of volume of some money there as well. So we've got money investing at where the rates are these days. As we look at this, and I want to point out, and Mr. Donovan and I have comments, and we'll talk about this in the budget process, is, the Fed is obviously changing and telling us that, interest rates might come down. We're not going to see this climbing Fed rate. That is going to change our estimations for 25. We're going to be solid. We think we'll easily meet, if not exceed, all the budget requirements we put on investments this year. But 25, I think we're going to see a little less there. So. Now on to sales taxes. This is our biggest revenue stream, especially for the general fund. And so I want to spend a little time just walking through what we have operationally in sales tax streams in Webster Groves. We have many different taxes. I'm going to sort of jump through the table here. The pooled sales tax is the big one we talk about, goes through the county, supports the general fund. We also have the public safety sales tax, which comes through the county. It's not our tax, it's applied by the county, and that is paid to us at 0.5%. We get pretty close to our full point of sale amount, meaning that it matches pretty close to like the capital improvement sales tax, the numbers. The ones above that are all our local decision. They're considered our taxes that the city of Webster Groves has assessed to sales here. The local option sales tax is a quarter penny, supports the general fund. The fire sales tax goes to the general funds required to go towards fire protection at a quarter penny. The capital improvement sales tax goes to the capital improvement fund. That's a 0.5 cent. And then parks and stormwater tax is a 0.5 cent, 80% of the park fund, 20% of the stormwater fund. So those are our sales tax lines. Use tax is a sales tax, even though it's a use tax, it's in the same family. So we classify it as a sales tax. And again, that's 1.5 and it all applies to the general fund. We are lucky the way that was written, in fact, because obviously the 1.5 includes the park and the park tax and also the capital improvement tax. But the way the legislature wrote it, they allowed those revenues, even though it's applying that rate to the use tax, to flow to the general fund. So I wanted to go over and highlight for you in calendar year 2023, we have the top 11 accounts, the sales tax accounts in Webster Groves. I used 11 because number one is motor vehicle sales. So this is the sales tax that you pay on a car when you sell it, or the buyer pays, the sales tax for that transaction. That is our number one sales tax payer in the city of Webster Groves. That's obviously not one person, it's many people, but it's one account, as we call it in the revenue world. But 2 through 11 are our top 10 business accounts in the city. And so you can see them all there. Schnucks, Eastern Missouri Concrete, Olive and Oak Perennial, Ozark Building Materials, Straub's, Walgreens, the Frisco Bar Room, Dobbs, Lawn Care Equipment Company, and Ameren, Missouri for obviously electric sales tax. These 11 accounts, despite all the businesses in the city, provide 50% of all the sales tax we generate. So that's just to give you a sense. You as council members can see their individual percentages. You can see as you get down to number 11 how small of a percentage that is. That's not to speak ill of any of our businesses, but the importance of that class in terms of really providing the sales tax revenue that we see. Reason we bring that up is we talk about grocery sales tax. Obviously, 2 of the grocers are on that top 10 list. And so just to give you a sense of the grocery sales tax impact, when you look at it here, these are the different taxes. When we have isolated out all the different businesses that sell food, grocery items that would be removed from the tax base. That's really what's happening with the grocery sales tax. The tax base is what items we will tax. And so the legislature would say, we're taking these items out of the tax base. You can't tax them anymore. There are 35 businesses within the city of Webster Groves that in calendar year 23 collected taxes that would be exempt under the various forms of the legislation that exist. Some of their transactions.
Right.
Those transactions related to grocery sales account for about $860,000 worth of revenue over a calendar year across all the different funds. You can see that as a percentage of the revenue received, it's about 12% uniformly across the way. I want to highlight the use tax. There's 186 companies that have paid sales tax on grocery items through the use tax to Webster Groves. That is our great one to use is Omaha Steaks. If you order food from the online sources, those corporations out of state, they're not paying a sales tax. Even if they may be here, they're headquartered out of state, they're paying the use tax. So collectively, those 186 companies paid in just under $28,000 in calendar year 23 towards the sales tax. That would be exempt under the legislation as well. And then the bottom line for public safety, that is not our tax. We don't collect it, so we don't have access to the data on how much was collected by that. We know it's a half cent. It tracks pretty close, so I put the numbers in at 171,000, much like the capital improvement tax. It would be removed from the base, so it would not be collected on that as well. 885 plus 170. And we're actually going to get to that because the pool, of course, we have a multiplier we have to add to the pooled sales tax. So these are the true collections. That's what I want to point out. What was collected out of Webster Groves businesses, 885 plus likely 171 for the police, for the public safety sales tax in grocery sales.
So how does parks? Okay, I'm the dumb question.
Councilmember Alexander, the parks and stormwater tax is applied to anything in the tax base that's taxable under sales tax. So that's a separate tax, a separate sales tax of a half cent. So if they remove grocery items, that's $171,000 that we would expect would be removed from sales tax revenue.
Because when we tax the groceries, we apply a percentage of it
to parks. That's correct.
To parks, to fire, to pools, to.
Yes. We apply, council member, we apply those taxes to that purpose because that is what the legislature allowed us to do, and then the voters approved those sales taxes. Does that make sense, council member?
Yeah.
Okay. Can I ask a question while we're still on this? So in terms of like the amounts listed here, that's based on essentially sales tax being eliminated from all grocery category items at this point, because there are different versions, right? There are different versions.
Yes. So, I mean, there's a whole
worst case scenario.
This is everything that's right now called grocery food. Right.
Okay.
So if they pull out, this doesn't include prepared food, that's already pulled out. So the idea of like your rotisserie chicken that's there ready to eat at Schnucks, if you go to the deli. I expect that those various different pieces of legislation are going to cause revenue to have to create more tax codes to identify what's taxable and what's not. But ultimately, this is what is called grocery food. So in the sense of removing sales tax from groceries, if the universal application goes, this is the number.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, I don't know which piece of legislation will actually get across the finish line or has some real strongest legs. So.
Thanks.
So what does that do in terms of revenue? And this is by fund, so you can see the capital improvement fund, 171,000. That sales tax goes directly there. The park fund, Councilmember Alexander, they get 80% of the tax collected, so that's $137,000 impact. Stormwater fund is about 34,000. The general fund is at about 590,000 if those numbers are reduced. That includes the multiplier on the pooled sales tax. So this number, I just want to go back. The pooled sales tax is 342,000 in collections. We actually receive more than that. We receive about 114% of what we put in. So that same theory would apply. If you take out the grocery amount to 342, the pooled sales tax is going to pay us back less than 114% of that. So it's got a little multiplier added. And then the general fund, and that'll affect the general fund, along with the local option sales tax and the other items. The public safety sales tax I added here, also the general fund, is 171. All told, it's about $1 million over the whole general fund budget, which is about 5% of the budget. Excuse me, $1 million over the whole budget. It's about 800,000 over the general fund budget. So a little under 5%. But again, out of sales tax themselves, it's about 12% of our budget in terms of sales tax that we expect to lose if the universe of grocery food is eliminated.
So we're basically saying if we lose the revenue from grocery tax receipts, we got to find $1.1 million someplace else to cover these things.
Across all funds, yes. If they use the whole grocery code, yes. And we use these numbers. This is what MML asked to help create their estimates on. So we've continued to use that same code. So I pause here if there are any comments or questions on this before I move on.
So this is the dilemma, I will say, and I understand that this council is not reflective fully of what MML policy is, and I know I personally am not all the time as well. But this is a big chunk, so I do think we need to consider if we as a council want to take some sort of position. I think we also ought to consider as we get toward the day in which we have muni governments in Jeff City that some of us ought to be represented there, at least have the conversation. Because there are other ways to do this, right? We could means test this. They could provide other revenue sources for us to replace lost revenue. It doesn't have to be a no, don't do this. It could be a, we understand why you want to do this. It's good policy, and here's maybe something else that you might consider with it. So I don't want anyone here to think I'm asking us to just say, no, this is a terrible idea. My concern is the lost revenue, the policy itself. To be honest, I think, a lot of states do this. They find other ways that are not as regressive to tax their citizens.
Exactly. I remember being in Michigan, and I was amazed that when we went in the grocery store, and I realized when we checked out that there were no taxes on the groceries. But we would actually be looking at this potentially in conjunction with looking at they're talking again about removing the personal property tax or addressing the personal property tax. So in both these cases, it's a matter of figuring out what would replace the revenue required that are being covered by those things.
Well, as I can't remember whether it was the city manager or our assistant city manager pointed out to me, if they do this, it's essentially saying everything you gained with the use tax goes away.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So, assuming people don't just spend the money they saved in the bookstore or, restaurant food.
Right. Don't eat anymore, just read.
I mean, I'm willing to say this is absolutely horrendous idea by the Missouri legislature and be happy to do whatever this council has its power to do in order to tell the legislature stop it.
I disagree, but I think there's a lot of benefit to citizens in terms of finding a different way to find the money. But I agree, it'd be a big hit to if there wasn't some kind of revenue replacement.
Well, if the council is, go ahead, Pam.
All I was going to say is that there's some education needed.
So
right, exactly. I agree, Pam. Yeah.
So what I was going to suggest is what I can do is circulate to council. I was given a copy of the resolution, and I can't remember which local municipality just passed it, but so you can take a look at what that language looks like. as I said, I don't think we necessarily want to do exactly what everyone else is doing because we have some different thoughts, but at least it will give us some idea of where people are positioning themselves on this particular issue. And I do think we don't have the luxury of a whole lot of time because, to be honest, it sounds like campaigns are feeling this. We now have another congressional race in the state of Missouri, which apparently has added more fuel to this fire based on who wants to get elected. So, I'll do that within the next day or two, and then maybe we can talk again about this. And I'll do a little canvassing of you all. That's not the right word, but if there's kind of language that you would like us to consider, we can think about that as well, if that's all right with you all.
Sure.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
So budget amendments in terms of the city, as we talked about at our last quarterly update, we're going to try to do our best, and the goals of this to get that budget versus actual variance at the end of the year to align better. So we don't have a wild swing in between the actuals and the estimates of the budget to align those with realities. And if we're seeing trends, if the use tax starts to go down, we identify those revenue trends earlier and bring those amendments forward and make adjustments with the council in a shorter time period. So at this point, I think that our amendments are likely coming as we get closer to the 25 budget, because we'll be redoing budget estimates really in end of February, have a little more sales tax data into March to finalize the proposed budget. Likely to see our estimates kicking off another set of amendments to review, where we're going to be at in 24. Also, the sales tax returns. I do think we have not seen slowing of a major degree, but there could be slowing, right? We're at the typical point where we start to see the natural slowing in the first quarter of the calendar year after the holidays. Is that going to be deeper than we've seen over the last couple of years? Is consumer sentiment really dropping in a way that they're going to slow down buying? Business licenses, we're doing some more active review of our audits of business licenses to ensure that we're gaining the full amount of the business license fee that we're owed under the ordinance. So that may encompass a small revision there. And then also as we go through building permits and other permit revenue, it's hard to estimate every year because if you get one big project, it move the whole estimate up or down. So in that process as well, I've talked with the city manager and Mr. Donovan, and we are going to be aligning really starting in next year's budget, but we may start to do some of the journal entries now in accounting, moving one-time expectations. So a great example is that the legal settlements and the insurance settlements, right now we, in our system, bucket them all in with the reoccurring revenue. So when we create the 5-year plan and such, we have to pull them out. And this would allow in our system, it's a little different accounting architecture, but very simple, to really at a push of a button, give us a sense of here's truly what we can expect sort of year over year, our numbers. So that a big building permit that comes once every 20 years, like a Webster U building being redone, isn't put in and change those averages going forward and really pulls out and such. So that's really more of an inside thing, but it'll affect the reports and how you see them with some other classifications. Okay. So those are ones I expect. And then our budget process, just briefly, we will kick off next week, next Wednesday or Thursday, I believe it is.
Next week.
Yes, next week. So the city manager and I will kick off the budget. We will open the process for our departments to start making their requests. I would expect that after our next meeting of the council, we'll be launching our balancing act or our community input survey on the budget for this coming year. I'll certainly let the manager speak to the priorities and such, but I would expect then you all, with the election, we will be in the first week in May, our first meeting in May, when the new council is sat and gone through the swearing in, the second meeting in April, fun and tradition. That first meeting in May is we'll introduce the budget and begin our process in the budget at that point. Obviously have to have the budget done by the end of June. So I think it's June 18th this year, I think, is our meeting. So we've got 4 meetings with council scheduled. Certainly we can add more if you need special meetings to go over budget items. So
Eric, I had a question on the budget performance report.
Yep.
What does budget year-to-date transactions mean versus year-to-date transactions?
Certainly. So that's budget minus year-to-date transactions.
Okay.
So that if you look at that line item, year-to-date transactions is what we've expended. It's gone out the door. Budget minus year-to-date transactions, what's left in the budget account for that item. So just off the top line, real estate taxes, we've had 916,000 collected. You see that right on 401. That means we have 280,000 left to collect to meet the budget.
So moving down to line 442 ambulance charges.
Yes.
This is a significant revenue. It looks like we're going to far exceed what our budget is for this year. I mean, I know that in the past, this council has talked about the need for an additional ambulance or anything like that. Is this an indication? I know that in the past years, we've also exceeded that budget. Is this also just a further indication that we're moving in that direction?
I would caution us not to read into this one yet. If you remember last fiscal year, we had a period where billing charges got stopped when we changed to software. So the billing company continues to catch up. So some of these numbers this year are inflated because they're pulling last year revenue that we would have realized then into this. So the billing, now I don't want to say, I think the billing is going to be up. I just don't want to give us a sense that we're at a peak surge number of rides. I don't think the rides have changed in any significant number that to give that a causality. I think it's more correlation.
Thank you.
Yep. Happy to answer any other questions. And again, for everyone else, it's on the website. So
do we have other questions?
I have done.
I am just curious about the line 404, personal property delinquents, 289%.
yes, of the percentage of the budget there.
Yeah.
So our budget is $3,400. That's what we budgeted as delinquent collections.
Right.
And year to date, we've collected 9,900. So this may be one or two accounts that have finally finished and decided not to fight the property tax bill, or they've been delayed in such a way. This includes anything that is not, so anything that even is just last year, even though it may only be a few months delinquent, if it's not the 24 bills that went out in December, it's in here as delinquent. So it doesn't have to be a 10-year-old tax or something like that. It could just be somebody who had an issue with the Board of Equalization or something.
A day late.
Yeah. Could be a day late. It's going to be delinquent if it's a day late. So,
other questions? As usual, very thorough. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Donovan. We appreciate the level of detail you're providing us and the public. So good job.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
If you all don't mind, we will not make any appointments to boards and commissions tonight because we are expecting. It's on. Am I just not speaking into it? We will not make any appointments to boards and commissions tonight. We're expecting additional interviews, or at least one additional interview. Is there anything else? We're going to hang on to that as well. But we'll get to all of the outstanding ones at our next meeting. So I think we have just a couple of minutes. We can take a couple of minutes and reconvene and begin our regular meeting.
Maybe try another. Maybe not.
Thank you. All right. Welcome to the January 16th City Council meeting for the City of Webster Groves. We welcome comments from those of you who are in attendance, as well as those of you who are on Zoom. If you are on Zoom, we're going to ask you to use the raise your hand function when we get to that point in our agenda. And please note that public comments are really only available during our remarks of the community section. We'll ask you to limit those comments to 3 minutes and state your name and address when you begin those comments. And we will begin with the roll call.
Yes, Mayor. Mayor Arnold.
Here.
Councilmember Bliss.
Here.
Councilmember Franklin.
Here.
Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Councilmember Alexander.
Here.
Councilmember Richardson.
Here.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Here.
And right out of the gate, we're going to begin with remarks from the community and visitors. I have one speaker's card. I forgot to say that part, but I think everyone sitting here knows about the speaker's card. So Dave Buck, you are up first.
Dave Buck, 144 South Elm. Yesterday, this holiday reminded me of this quote by Dr. King. In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. This quote has a definite meaning for many of my Black friends in North Webster who have shared with me in conversations as recently as today. First, Webster's own MLK community event has not been held for 4 straight years, 2 years due to COVID, and the last 2 years due to what has been explained to me by a leading pastor in our community as a shared lack of interest and leadership in the city, school district, and clergy. This sends a terrible message, particularly to our Black community. To them, the silence of our friends is deafening, and it is why I am happy to organize the return of this event in 2025, if you'll let me. Second, the long-term steep decline of Webster's Black population and Black-owned and operated businesses is irrefutable and tragic, but it is correctable with long-term priority and commitment. In your strategic plan, people is your #1 value and states that all people are valued, respected, and supported. This is not what my friends believe anymore, given that Blacks are moving out due to the loss of affordability, dignity, trust, and cultural identity. To them, the silence of our friends is deafening. So what can City Council do about it before it is too late and we become white Webster? Here's 3 ideas. Take the currently unassigned $95,000 balance of the Special Initiatives Fund and begin by either 1, creating a new ad campaign targeting to attract new Black families to Webster to rebuild our Black community, or 2, in our unofficial City of the Arts, creating new events that promote, appreciate, and celebrate our many Black artists and their talents in the fine arts, music, theater, and literature, or 3, extending the successful Thrive program to develop the next generation of Black business entrepreneurs in our community. And I bet Lee Moss would come back to help. May the silence of our friends toward Webster's Black community end once and for all. It's time to act boldly and to restore what they have lost. I know you can do it. No, you must do it, or risk losing our Black community forever. And I don't want to lose my friends, but they'll be gone in less than 5 years if we don't do anything. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Those of you who are joining us via Zoom, if you'll use the raise your hand function, we can call on you for public comment. All right, I don't see any hands raised, so we will continue on with our agenda. Is there anyone on council, city attorney, city manager with new business not on the agenda? All right, then we will move to our agenda to new business, and we will start I will entertain a motion to designate Karen Rangel as deputy city clerk.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to make a motion for the designation of Karen Rangel as deputy city clerk. Second.
Before we do the voting, I just want to say on behalf of the entire council, welcome. We're happy to have you with us and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
All right.
Councilmember Bliss?
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander?
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd?
Yes.
Mayor Arnold?
Yes. All right, we will move on, and I'm going to skip around here and ask Councilmember Bliss to call for the first and second reading of Bill number 9243, please.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call the first and second reading of Bill number 9243.
Second.
Bill 9243, first reading. An ordinance levying the cost of abating certain nuisances, removal of grass, weeds, and limbs, etc., as special tax bills against the properties hereinafter described and constituting levies as liens on the respective properties.
Is there any discussion? Unfortunately, I see some of the same addresses that continue to be on this list. All right, we'll have the second reading then, please.
Bill 9243, second reading. An ordinance levying the cost of abating certain nuisances, removal of grass, weeds, and limbs, etc., as special tax bills against the properties hereinafter described and constituting levies as liens on the respective properties.
All right, I'm going to ask Councilmember Franklin to please call for the first, second, and then we'll get to the third reading of Bill number 9244.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to call for the first and second reading of bill number 9244.
Second.
Bill 9244, first reading. An ordinance providing for the submission to the qualified voters of the city of Webster Groves of amendments to the charter of the city, all of which should be submitted to the electors at the general municipal election on April the 2nd, 2024, and proposing amendments to the preamble and sections 2.12, 5.6, 5.18, subsection 2, 7.6, 7.12, 9.2, 10.3, 13.4 and 14.9, and repealing ordinance 9241.
All right, just so council and the public understand, thanks to the eagle eyes of the chair of our Charter Review Advisory Board, a couple of very minor changes have been made to what we're sending to the voters, none of them substantive. No, we don't. It's not, we don't want to hear Neil read these over and over again. We're going to promise you after tonight, you don't have to read this again. But we did need to make those corrections, and we had time to do it before sending it on to the election board. So it seemed better to repeal and replace the ordinance. Is there any discussion?
So that's why we have more than 5 that we discussed earlier going on.
These are the same 10 that we voted on in the past. There were just a few errors that were found by Chairperson Kirkton. She asked that we change those, and it was easier. My understanding was it was easier to just repeal, make those revisions, and then pass again those 10 that we have already debated. There's nothing new in here other than slight language changes.
But this includes the 5 that we spoke earlier about.
It does not. Those 5 we'll consider in upcoming months, and then we'll have to do separate bills to consider those.
Okay, thank you.
And do we have like 2 changes in one of the sections, and that's why there are 9 sections listed, but they're really 10?
Yes.
Yeah. Any further discussion? All right, we'll have the second reading, please.
Bill 9244, second reading. An ordinance providing for the submission to the qualified voters of the city of Webster Groves amendments to the charter of the city, all of which should be submitted to the electors at the general municipal election on April the 2nd of 2024, and proposing amendments to the preamble and sections 2.12, 5.6, 5.18, subsection 2, 7.6, 7.12, 9.2, 10.3, 13.4, and 14.9, and repealing ordinance 9241.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to call for the third and final reading of bill number 9244 and subsequent adoption. Pursuant to Missouri law, third reading can be had on the same day for a compelling reason. The compelling reason to do so for this is that the election certification forms are due to the election board by January 23rd.
Second.
Any discussion?
You have to vote on it.
We have to, do we vote on the motion first and then we'll vote on the third? Yes, so
Okay.
we'll go ahead with the vote.
Sure. Councilmember Franklin?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander?
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd?
Yes.
Mayor Arnold?
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss?
Yes.
All right, so we now have any discussion that we need to have before we vote, before we have the third reading?
Before we have a third reading, right.
All right, let's have the third reading.
I think we have to move for a third reading.
We did that.
He did do that.
We did, no, that's to have a third reading. Well, all right, that probably does qualify. You're right.
He did both.
Okay, oh, we did both. Okay,
Yeah.
I missed that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your.
Bill 9244, third and final reading. An ordinance providing for the submission of the qualified voters of the city of Webster Groves amendments to the charter of the city, all of which should be submitted to the electors at the general municipal election on April the 2nd, 2024, and proposing amendments to the preamble and sections 2.12, 5.6, 5.18, subsection 2, 7.6, 7.12, 9.2, 10.3, 13.4, and 14.9, and repealing ordinance 9241.
I'm going to assume that there is no further discussion. Let's have the vote then, please.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander?
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd?
Yes.
Mayor Arnold?
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss?
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin?
Yes.
All right, is there anything that anyone would like to remove from the consent agenda? All right, may I have a motion for the approval of the consent agenda, please?
Looking for me?
If that would be your pleasure.
Yes, Mayor, I call for the approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
Thank you.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
All right, and we are not making any appointments to boards and commissions this evening. I do believe we are having a brief executive session. So Councilmember Bliss.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for an executive closed session related to attorney-client privileged communications, Missouri Statute 610.021, open parens 17, close parens.
Yes.
And number 17.
That,
17.
Okay. And second. Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
All right, we will proceed to our closed session. Thank you all for joining us this evening. We look forward to seeing you again soon.
Take notice, it's 7:45.